Hello and welcome to our video series on the existence of God, where we explore questions and topics related to God's existence and also analyze arguments for and against the existence of God. Most of us know the story of the famous Galileo. The story, roughly speaking, goes something like this. Galileo, a brilliant scientist that bravely stands for truth. The church, on the other hand, terrified of science, tries to silence him. And then a dramatic clash takes place, culminating in torture and suppression, and eventually a victory for science against Christianity. But what if I told you that's not how it happened? The real Galileo story is far more interesting and far more human than the popular myth. Let's dive into what really happened. Firstly, Galileo was a scientist who loved God. He was not an enemy of Christianity. He was a committed Christian who believed that the laws of nature were written by the hand of God in the language of mathematics. He didn't reject the Bible. He didn't see science and scripture at war. In fact, he argued that both came from the same God and therefore could never contradict each other. So the classic science versus Christianity storyline already starts to fall apart. Now, here's something surprising. Galileo's real opponents were secular scholars, and that's super interesting. His earliest and fiercest critics were not church leaders. They were secular Aristotelian philosophers. These academics were deeply loyal to Aristotle's ancient cosmology. But Galileo shattered their worldview when he discovered the sunspots, mountains on the moon, a supernova, and the moons of Jupiter. His evidence humiliated the academic establishment. So what did they do? They pushed the church authorities to act, not because of theology, but because of wounded pride. So how did the church respond? The church's initial response was supportive. When Galileo visited Rome in 1611, Jesuit astronomers welcomed him. Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, the church's topmost theologian, actually told Galileo, and I quote, "If you can prove heliocentrism, we will adjust our interpretation of scripture accordingly." End quote. Now that's not anti-science, that is scientific caution. At that point, heliocentrism wasn't proven, and that is important. Here's the part nobody talks about. In Galileo's time, scientists didn't yet have evidence to conclusively prove that the earth moved around the sun. Galileo didn't have proof for heliocentrism. At that time, three models existed. The old Aristotelian model, which said Earth is fixed and the sun and planets orbit the Earth. Second, the Tychonic model, according to which the Earth is fixed, the sun orbits the Earth, and the planets orbit the sun, which actually fit the data of that particular time extremely well. And then the Copernican model, which was Galileo's view, the heliocentric model. But Galileo ignored the strongest competing model, mocked the weakest one, and presented his own as fact. What was his proof? A theory about tides caused by Earth's movement. It was wrong, and Einstein later said it made no sense. So the church wasn't rejecting science, it was asking for scientific proof. In short, it was primarily a scientific problem. Alright, now we come to the human drama. Galileo was brilliant, but he was also arrogant, sarcastic, and often reckless. Galileo's personality made everything worse. He loved insulting people who disagreed with him. He wrote in Italian instead of Latin, giving the public more access to science but angering the academic elite. He publicly mocked scholars who disagreed with him. He framed scientific questions as theological debates. And when his once supportive friend became Pope Urban VIII, Galileo made a fatal mistake. In his book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, he put the Pope's arguments into the mouth of a foolish character named Simplicio, a genius publicly calling the Pope simpleton. This personal insult, more than scientific content itself, was the final spark that ignited his trial. So this wasn't science versus Christianity, it was a fight between two egos. So what happened to Galileo? Contrary to popular retellings, Galileo was never tortured. He wasn't thrown into a dungeon. He lived under comfortable house arrest. He had servants. He continued writing books and he produced some of his greatest work under house arrest. His two new sciences, written in 1638 during house arrest, transformed the field of physics. So it was not exactly the showdown between science and religious tyranny that we often imagine. Alright, so what should we learn from all of this? Lesson 1. Scripture was never the problem. Human interpretation was. Galileo argued, and rightly so, that biblical passages describing the sun rising are phenomenological, not scientific, and modern readers agree with his interpretation. The conflict arose from misinterpretation, not scripture itself. Lesson 2. Science often resists new ideas even without religion. Galileo's fiercest opponents were secular professors, not priests. Scientific paradigms resist disruption regardless of worldview. Lesson 3. Institutional politics and personal pride can distort truth on all sides. Pope Urban VIII, the Jesuits, secular academics, and Galileo himself, they all contributed to the escalation. Lesson 4. The conflict between science and Christianity is mostly a modern myth. Galileo's story shows that the real struggle wasn't between science and Christianity. It was between old ideas and new evidence, between powerful institutions and between strong personalities. Now, this is fundamentally a human story. All right, let's draw this to a close. The next time you hear that Galileo was tortured for doing science, remember, the truth is far more nuanced and far more human. History tells us that Galileo was a devout Christian. The church was initially supportive of his theory, whereas the secular scholars opposed him, and Galileo himself could not decisively prove the heliocentric model, and his trial resulted from politics and personality more than doctrine. So far from affirming a simplistic science versus Christian narrative, the Galileo case demonstrates the need for humility in science, in theology, and in human discourse itself. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content such as this. I'll see you in the next episode. God bless you.